Good afternoon and welcome everybody, and thank you for making time to join our session today. My name is Neil Richardson and I'm your host for today's presentation, Simplifying Data Science, How to Add Predictive Analytics to Your Forecasting. By predictive analytics we mean using the data and the knowledge in hand to make predictions about possible future events. It involves extracting information from one or more sources of data and using data science algorithms to suggest future trends and patterns. Terms often bandied about in this area include data mining, statistical analysis, data modeling, machine learning, and even artificial intelligence. That all sounds very complicated and difficult, and for many business people pretty alienating. However, we're seeing these functions start to be democratized and folded into packaged applications. Our session today is by Alberto Fiocca, a specialist in planning and corporate performance management with many years of experience both here in Australia and back in his native Italy. Using an example of a sales forecast, he's going to show in a live demo how this exciting but complicated area of data science has been incorporated into Board, an enterprise BI platform, in a way that everyday business people can put it to good use. The session will take just 30 minutes and we'll allow some time at the end for questions. And to ask questions, we request that you use the questions box in the bottom right-hand corner of the webinar tool that you're using. We also advise that we're recording the session. We'll upload it to our YouTube channel and send you a link. Alberto, over to you.
Thanks, Neil. Good day, everyone. I'm Alberto Fiocca, and today I'm going to show you how to get the most value out of your data using Board, analytic, and predictive capabilities. What we see today. Let's have a look at a planning input example, a workflow simulation, and a process control. Let's add some standard analytics for more insights using Board analytical functions. Let's apply a predictive forecast to compare with the planner inputs. And let me show you how to be a data scientist. So how to build a predictive model using Board predictive analytics engine. And finally, let's deploy the application across the business, and I will show you how to visualize and analyze the results and how to see the impact of our forecasting. Let me give you a brief introduction of what's Board. Board is a BI and a CPM software based on a toolkit approach, which means coding-free implementation in a single integrated environment. It gives you the flexibility to build and create any kind of reporting across different businesses, covering a wide range of typical BI analysis, interactive dashboards, KPI, score tags, predictive analytics, and simulation, and providing the capabilities of a modern management system into the decision-making process. So we're going to use the tool for planning and forecasting, strategy formulation, what-if analysis, financial consolidation. Let's switch to Board environment itself now, and let's go straight to the application. I have created now a demo where this is a sample application divided basically into main areas, including one, a planning and reporting application, plus some simulation and forecasting analysis. Going in the planning area, what we see here is a combination of most of the common Board functionalities. And here the idea is always to be a single salesman creating its own budget. and comparing its budget against actual amounts and actual trends. As you can see now, board is not only a BI tool, but is a CPM tool. So we are able to do data entry. In this example, let's say at single sales level. We can also play with total numbers, and the tools automatically spread the total across the different products in this case. And here what we have also is the ability to do some data entry on algorithms and being able to quickly have a response from the tool telling us what's going on if we are going to input some sort of data. Again, all the objects in the screen are combined together, which means that we can select and navigate throughout our data. There are the basic business intelligence functionalities like the drilling down function. So from a product dimension, we can drill down at monthly level to see what's going on behind and keep drilling down the information. Again, it's always a combination of having numbers and alerting system on one side, and on the same page, let's say, a chart visualization of my numbers. All the objects, as you can see, interact together, and all the objects are drillable to see what's going behind. Once I'm happy with my budgeting input, as a single statement, I can submit my budget, and you see that from this moment on, I'm not anymore able to do any data entry. Switching to a monitor cockpit, what I can see is having an overview on which are all the statuses of my budget. I can add additional information like comments. And save the comments, so I can store the information here. I have some KPIs information for a quick overview, and I'm able also to save different versions of my budget for the future analysis and comparison. In addition to this, what's good of having a single integrated environment is that now we can quickly analyze within the same application actual and historical data, getting powerful insights into opportunities and potential risks, and understanding the probability and the impact on our businesses. I have produced here a dashboard where, again, we can always drill and interact and analyze in depth our data. We can move back. You see here that we have a chart object to represent in a graphical view our numbers. We have sparkling line concepts just to show you some simulation. And here on the chart, we see a trend analysis of our sales. What we can start seeing here is the use of board analytical functions. So by default, the board is giving you the option to use a set of analytical functions. In this example, in the chart, we have a standard deviation, an average, and some minimum and maximum indicators. On the left side, here is a KPI dashboard where I used our analytical function to create a quick and easy to understand reporting. How to use this? So let's just switch behind the scene, and I want to show you how to build this information and how to add this information to our current and existing application. As for the average sales standard deviation, what board is providing me is a set of analytical functions which are basically divided into three main groups: time series, statistical functions, and analytical functions. And all these functions are completely at your fingertips. So you don't have to be a data science. You just use and tell boards and the system what you want to show. Let me show you how. So we are going to drag down a label object, and I want to add to this existing dashboard, which is the highest and the lowest monthly sales. We go inside the layout. We decide which is the measure we want to visualize. We go into the analytics tab, and we choose, for example, the minimum value. We choose on which period we want our function to run the calculation, and we set up the system to show this value. Okay. Again, here using board now we can quickly change all the formats and all the information, or also using existing indicators to be quicker, we can copy and paste some settings. This is for the lowest amount. This is, again, we create a new one for the maximum amount. So we choose the amount, so we choose our measure, we decide which is the analytical function we want to apply, maximum value, on what? On a particular period, in our case, and we tell the system to show this value. Again, I can paste the information. So in this moment, you see that very quickly we have integrated our existing dashboard with additional information. And again, as you can see, we can navigate throughout our reporting to see what's going on. Here, you can see that quickly the numbers are changing. Here there is a not available because I have included also the zero values as the lowest monthly sales. We have a frequency of 20 months and time series length of 2 years, where the last recent sales has been made in the previous year, and there has been a dormancy period of 4 months. Together with this, let's focus now on how we can leverage board and its predictive analytic engines capabilities without being data scientists. Our goal will be to use historical and actual data to allow board to analyze, learn, create, and predict a most likely forecast trend. The current situation in the current build, what we have are actual data and our budget sales team input. How can we now use the system and ask the system to help us to provide a deeper understanding of our data, creating a scenario, a possible scenario of a forecast, including an optimistic and a pessimistic view, and a most likely trend. Before going behind the scene, let me just give you some inputs. So the predictive analytic engine is native integrated into board, has been developed in collaboration with artificial intelligence experts. It runs using the board in memory technology, which means that not also you run the forecast, but you can save and store the information and the outputs in your application and be able to use this information for additional analysis. There is the flexibility to define and change analytical models and is designed for business users. We show you how to set up a forecast model. It included a variety of statistical techniques. When you run a predictive analytics scenario, the engine will detect a time series labeled as discontinuous, intermittent, or smooth. The time series will be trimmed and will be removing and will be clear out, removing the zero values. The system will identify which is the best model for each series via competition, identifying the outliers, and detect some useful coverage. The system will then forecast and produce some outputs. So basically, in our predictive analytics scenarios, there will be always a learning part. So the system will use a training set, so our historical data, to produce a possible output, and the recent test set to evaluate the model and to arrange the model within the most likely way. Let's go back to the database part of the board, and let's go into the predictive analytics model creation. So what you see here is that this is the interface where the user can set up the tool to calculate an automatic forecast based on historical data through the application of mathematical models that will be automatically adjusted. As you can see, the tool is really flexible, easy to use for business user, high performing, and what the most important thing is that everything is naturally embedded into the tool. So there is no need to run and to write code. It's provided for the final and business users. Let's create a new possible forecast scenario. As you can see here, we can create a new scenario. So let's give the scenario a name, forecast webinar. We will use a learning forecast procedure. So as I told you, we will allow the system to learn from historical data and produce a most likely forecast each time we are going to run the calculation. As a target cube, we decide where we want to store our forecast estimation. I have created already the cubes. So I'm going to input and say I'm going to output and store the information into the forecast quantity cube. And let's use some settings. So user can create the measure. I want to observe the historical data from the first loaded period to the last one, or I can define a different time series to read data from. I can use a global method via competition or some naive algorithm using a seasonal or a normal naive algorithm. Seasonal, if I know and if I see that there are some seasonal components in my historical data. I can set up the level of confidence. Confidence means is the band used to represent the uncertainty of an estimate of a curve. So more, let's say that more I know my historical data, less confidence I should put into the system. Reconciliation will be used in case we have a multiple version for our measures. We can define also some forecast horizon. So we can define for how many periods the system should calculate our trend. In this case, we leave it 0 because we just want to cover all the system time range. We can merge the observed values of the forecast measure together with the actual one, and we can use a multi-threading algorithm if the machines allow that. This is now the most important part where I decide which is the measure that I want to analyze in order to produce my forecast. So as we saw before, we go inside the layout. We choose the sales quantity, and we are going to define this measure as the observed one. In this report, we can add different blocks where we can also create some sort of algorithm to use as observed values. Remember, the observed values will be always 1. In case you can add some covariates to be applied to our model. In the final part, while the system is running the forecast calculation, it will produce some output. All these outputs, as I told you, there will be a smooth time series analysis, understanding and revealing which are smooth, intermittent, and discontinuous time series. The system is able to detect outliers, lower and upper intervals, and to determine some standard deviation using the algorithm. All this information, if we want, we can store within the system and use this information to produce additional analysis and additional reports. So we can quickly add insights to our data. Let's suppose now we just choose to output what's the lower, so what's the pessimistic and what's an optimistic scenario of our tool, and we just save the scenario. If I move to my application, now let's say that I want to provide the final end user the ability to run the forecasting simulation. I'm just going to create a quick procedure, run forecast analysis, where I tell the system, okay, choose the predictive model, and I just add a couple of more actions to allow a certain user interaction. Go back to the system, and now I say, okay, let me go in, let me define a button, and let me run the forecast analysis. So I have set up my system now. Let's see what will be the output of our system. Okay. As you can see now, the system is telling us what's an optimistic scenario, what's the lower level of a possible forecast, and what's the most likely trend in the next, in this case, 4 years. Okay. So you can see here how quickly is now to try to understand and check what's the actual plan and what's the difference between the plan and what the system is trying to helping us with this forecast. Again, always a mix of having visual data and having the numbers here below for a quick comparison. Imagine also now, again, sorry, we can always interact with our data using selections. So we can dive into the analysis to see by region and by product groups, in this case, what's going on. If I go back to my initial plan, what I have always also is an additional information of my forecast quantity. So for a single statement point of view, here will be probably much easier to understand what the historical data was, what the current information is, and what the system is telling me using the statistical function. Again, I can go to a new screen, so I can run a new analysis where you can see now that not only actuals and previous year quantity together with the budget, but a quick comparison between what's my plan and what the system telling me as a forecast. And here we see an example of different kind of analysis. Again, all this information you can interact with without any problem. I just want to show you very quickly an example of a forecast model where I run and I store most of the possible outputs that the system is producing. So I run a full forecast, and here what the system is telling me is a combination of optimistic, pessimistic views, some discontinued, intermittent, and smooth analysis, identification of outliers, so which is the information that basically is somehow disturbing my trend, and which maybe can be used as a covariate into the system. For example, remember we can always think about using a covariate some information which is not directly related with our, say, with our current plan, but which basically will affect a possible future trend. So what we saw together with the analytical function, there is also the option of clustering modeling. So the system is able to group and create a cluster of information for further analysis. So what we saw today? We saw a planning process example, which give us the idea of a board as a BI and planning tool within the same environment. We saw how easy it is to add additional information using standard analytical functions. We saw how we can ask the system to help us in the decision-making process producing a predictive forecast model which allows perhaps to create additional analysis and to go into the real detail of our process and our business and our numbers. And finally, we saw how easy and quick is to create a forecast model using board without being a data science, and how easy is to set up this information and to have it as an output for future analysis.
Alberto, thank you very much indeed, and I think a very fascinating presentation. I think the ability to look at the traditional in terms of budget versus actual tracking along, then introducing all that historical data and allowing it to provide some prediction on what the future may hold. Being able to do that as a business user within the tool rather than a technical or development type person, and then to be able to deploy that out at the individual level. So individual salespeople, business managers, operational type people can consume those prediction outputs as part of their standard reporting platform reporting frames. So I know that there is a lot more behind the system, and I think there are probably lots of questions to come out. We've got a few minutes to put aside for questions, and I suggest people type them in on the right-hand side there in the chat box. Now, we've had a couple come in already, and I'll read the question, and then Alberto will answer it. So here's the first one. I'm a retailer. My profit margins depend on juggling the product lines across lots of outlets. My product availability, logistics, and demand patterns are influenced by weather. Can I use this? So I'm assuming, can I use this weather data to improve my forecast accuracy?
Yes, we can definitely capture this data. In this board, not only analytical function and forecast analytics model, but includes also cloud connectors to leverage weather data services from, for example, brokers such as Yahoo. And this could be added to our existing data and to our model as a covariance. We can then measure how the changes in one variable are associated with changes in a second one, and how this covariance can influence our model.
Thank you, Alberto. So the next one is from somebody who's been doing a little bit of research of their own in this area. It is, I have been reading a lot about R, and that's the capital R, the letter R. What is R?
Okay, good question. So R is a programming language which has been originally written for statistically purposes, to do analysis, to include predictive analytics, and it has been extended to do data modeling, data mining, and predictive analytics. Board allows this function without need for programming. For example, it runs IDSI RX information, a proprietary prediction procedure conceived by IDSIA, which is the Swiss University Research Institute, which has collaborated with Board to create our model, and which is ranked as one of the top 10 artificial intelligence centers in the world.
Okay, thank you, Alberto. Next question, different tack completely. The example was a sales budget, and the predicted results were compared with those from the sales team. Can I decide which to proceed with? Does the system have workflow and version control?
Yes, that was exactly. It was a simple budget example. Coming back to the original overview of Board, It's full of planning systems, handling these processes across a business, across roles, through approvals, supporting decision, and with as many iteration scenarios as version as you normally need. Finally, of course, you quite easily allow a user or another user to promote a forecast as the one to action, and you can, let's say as a business manager, you can control who can access this information. We can add all the data for continued and future comparison.
Fantastic. Now, everybody, that's 30 minutes plus 6 or 7 minutes of questions. That is the time allocated for the session. Again, we thank you very much indeed for your attendance. As always with our lunchtime briefings, we will send out a link of the recording, and you'll get that in your email where you can watch the session again or pass it on to anybody else in the business. If you'd like to talk to anybody or ask more direct questions, please do contact the email address on your screen there, and there's more information about Board as a package, as a software solution at that website there. So we've one quick advertisement. The next upcoming event is budgeting and stop budgeting and start planning. So again, using the same tool, we'll move from focusing on a budgeting activity to focusing on planning. Our date is to be advised, and we'll get that out in the email in due course. And finally, we have a free white paper, What Every Business Needs to Know About Integrated Business Planning. And this is a great read that connects the planning, the two silos of planning that typically operate in many businesses, one focused on the operational side of the business and the other one focused on the financial side of the business. Integrated planning is all about bringing that together and getting one view of the business as a whole. Please do email Alina. There again, you can see the email address on your screen, and we'll email that white paper out to you. Thank you again. Thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. We run these sessions as education and information sessions. We hope we don't eat up all of your lunch break. Thank you and goodbye.